Great. So today I'm having a conversation with Toby Chant, who's leader of Glo Torbay, an innovator, an entrepreneur, church leader, and someone I've got to know through the Wildfires network a little bit more, but also through the Southwest networks that we're engaged in. So welcome, Toby. Good to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. It's my first time being on this end. I've done a few interviews like this with other leaders around Torbay, and I've been on your side. So now I know how everyone else feels.
Now you know how it's feeling. Good, great. So yeah, thanks for taking the time. I mean, why don't we start? Obviously, the whole premise of Standing in the Rubble is this idea that we're in a whole new landscape now. Everything's changed. Rapidly, far more rapidly than any of us could have imagined. Whatever the prophetic sense we had coming into the year, I don't think any of us envisaged this. So, do you want to talk about that briefly? What do you sense is happening? What do you sense is going on?
What do I sense is happening? What do I sense is going on? If you're anything like us, and if your church is anything like us, we've been praying for God to do a new thing. And around the Wildfires tagline of contending for the next great awakening, like that, for us, that's not hype. It's a genuine prayer. It's a genuine belief that something, God could do something or would do something new in our lifetime. And I think we all would agree that things needed to change. And I guess I said from the outset, I don't believe that God has caused this virus, that's not in my theology, that God has caused this stuff. But what I do think about God is that He, as a master craftsman and creative, that whatever raw material, whatever sin, whatever destruction, whatever brokenness is there, that He turns beauty from ashes. And so I don't believe that God has caused it, but I do believe that in this moment of crisis, and I'm not going to be saying anything new, I don't think that God is doing a new thing, which I think is aligning with some of the prayers and many of the prayers that we've been praying for years to come. On our first Sunday, our first live stream Sunday, and I just we just went really quickly into we've got to transition, we've got to pivot, we've got to get online, we've got to find ways to connect with our community as well as possible around pastoral care and good communication channels. And then we went online, and I just remember we were having to straddle this gathering of guys. It's great to be with you all, and this traumatic moment of the virus. There's lockdown, but I can remember in trying to encourage people in that space on that Sunday, talking about we've been recognizing that our political system needs reform. We've been recognizing that our education system needs reform. We've been recognizing that our welfare system needs reform. That these things don't really, from what I see, mirror the kingdom and the reign and the rule of God, and they uphold structures that I don't think are healthy structures. And so we're praying for those things to come down and to be changed and for reformation. And within a space of a couple of weeks, you have education is very different. This cohort will not have the exam results in the same way. They won't be tested and pressured in the same way. And we've realized that, that's okay. It's going to be okay for them. And welfare, the way that the government has injected finances into support people, look after people. I know there's been talk over the last few years about a magic money tree. There isn't one, but
now one.
Yeah, there's been sense of reform.
Yeah.
To answer what is God doing? I do feel that this crisis is causing some of the things that have been built up, man-made structures, institutions, things that are shaping our culture, have been pulled down.
Yeah.
And now there's an opportunity to start to rebuild things that hopefully are more in line with God's kingdom and God's ways.
And that's a great recognition, isn't it? I think so many of our prayers weren't just about, in fact, I think we recognized in our prayers, we certainly in our church, I think in Wildfires, I'm sure it's the same in yours, we recognized that whatever this revival, this renewal that was coming, wasn't going to look like things that had come before. It
Mm.
was going to have a whole new vibe to it. And I think it's really interesting. You know, you, like us, weren't just praying for more people to come to faith, for the churches to grow. We were praying for a whole societal renewal that would see changes in education and changes in welfare. I think, and I think it's really interesting because we're seeing that. And I think sometimes we can miss the opportunities there in front of us. It's really interesting, the conversations going on, because we took some big steps over solving things like homelessness overnight. And yeah, now there's challenges, but there's opportunities for, well, how do we not go back to where we were? How do we find new ways forward has this enabled us to break the back of something, or to have we been forced to find some new models around something that gives space for innovation, so we don't go back to where we were? And I think one of the greatest tragedies would be if a year from now or 18 months from now we look back and went, oh, that was a weird few months, but we're back to where we were now. Like that is not what we need to be praying for as churches. We need to be seeing the opportunities and helping, be involved in the conversations that help reshape our society around education, around healthcare, around social care, around homelessness, around welfare, around families, around whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So so then what's it looked like? What has that looked like for you as a church? What are the conversations you're involved in? What are the what's it meant? Not just moving online, but what are the changes you've seen in Torbay in the community, whether that's between churches or conversations you're involved in with your council and health care system or whatever? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I would say the thing which is the most beautiful, and I've shared this with quite a few people, is seeing streams of the church being united. And I've talked to people about church unity, and Rachel and I moved back, so we planted Glo. We moved back to Torbay in 2012. We both grew up here. And before we did, we had like a mirror in our flat, one bed flat in Ramsgate in East Kent. And we had like post-it notes praying for different people and different things. And we had different church leaders on there from Torbay. And unity was something which we really felt that we carried and was really important to us, partly because we're moving home. So we knew some of the church leaders, and partly because we felt that, you know, we kind of said to God, like, we're in this for the long haul. Like, not we're going to plant a church, 5-year plan, and then we might go and plant another church. But actually, this is our home. We're moving home because actually home is home. And we feel the best way that we can walk out the call of God in our life is to plant a church. The agenda was the kingdom, and planting the church was like the overflow of that, rather than the agenda being planting church. So because of those things, unity's always been like really close to our heart. Like, our parents have been involved in other churches. And so when I've talked to people about it, one of the things I've seen is there's a difference between the headlines of church unity, which might be really good projects like street pastors. So street pastors in Torbay, phenomenal example of churches coming together to make something happen. CAP is the same. We've got a youth trust called Links in Torbay. Great thing of churches coming together to make things happen. But I've always had a sense it's been about making things happen, and often because there should be. But what I've sensed in this, and the conversation I've been having, you know, during the last few years, is for me the signs of unity is not about the headlines of doing stuff together, but is kind of the litmus test is the friendship of leaders. Not relationship, because you can have a business relationship and a working relationship, and that's fine, but actually the friendship, like where genuinely I'm praying for your kids, where you know, and I'm praying that your church would thrive, and I'm able to be the person that you pick up the phone to because something's really difficult and there's tears. Like that friendship of leaders for me is like that's the metric of unity. And in this season, I've just seen an acceleration of that friendship around church leaders. And so the way I've described it is like I've never sensed such a mutual affection and shared vision amongst leaders, and there is a genuine mutual affection which I'm experiencing. I come off a Zoom call and I'm like, this is almost emotional to see the open-handedness of leaders, the mutual affection of leaders. And then the other thing which has happened is we've all been, and this I am talking specifically around a group of 5 of us, but it does overflow more than that. But there's 5 of us meeting pretty regularly. We've all been reading the same books.
Right.
So our teaching series over the last few months have all been pretty much informed by Pete's How to Pray, by John Mark Homer, and the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and influenced by people like John Tyson, and so there's very similar influences, and God's been drawing us to a similar place of rhythms of prayer, of formation, and so that mutual vision along with the mutual affection is something which is really beautiful. And then when stuff happens in church, so then when, like, our friend Ian is running the food bank and they have a challenge, like us and other churches are going, we'll send a call out to see if we can have drivers to come and serve you. But when it comes through that friendship first, I feel like there's so much more power and authority, and it's so much more kingdom than just that the tagline of shared projects. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I think that's beautiful, and it's it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think sometimes we can look at scriptures like, the world know that you're my disciples by the way you love one another, and we kind of think that that's how we love each other in our own church, which is true. But actually, the church, we're part of the church, not a church amongst many, and how we serve each other, bless each other, love each other, resource each other, encourage each other, cry with each other is absolutely, and it's such a prophetic stance, I think, for the moment. We live in such a polarized society where people who have differences don't listen to the other, don't listen to other voices, and actually to be able to model something in the church where we have people who don't necessarily hold the same views on everything, who don't necessarily read scripture the same way in every aspect of it, but are able to love each other beyond, through that, hear each other, encounter God through each other, but love each other in the middle of that, create those relationships in that context. I think that's a prophetic stance for the church in this society.
One of the things that someone said to me as I was sharing some of these bits is, if we want to see a great awakening, we need to see lots of little awakenings.
Right.
And I'm like, if we really want to see our dreams for Torbay, if we absolutely want to see that, that's not going to happen through Glo. We do think it can happen through the church being aligned with the Spirit of God, being consecrated to Him and His cause. We do think that, but I know I'm under no illusions, and no matter how good or big or influential our church gets, that's not enough. But for the church, for there to be mini awakenings, and for that to come together, the critical mass of that in our area, I genuinely, again, not hype, I can see that in our in our future, in our eye line. That's
beautiful. And you mentioned there about formation, and our spiritual formation in this time, and in some of the books you're reading, and prayer being, called into prayer, and what our spiritual formation looks like. And obviously, as church leaders, how we disciple, how we encourage discipleship, how we encourage people to engage with God is different at this time. Like, I think, and probably for us to emerge into whatever the new landscape's going to be, our formation needs to look a little bit different. What are you seeing in that area, and what are your thoughts in that area?
What am I seeing? One of the things I saw straight away was, as soon as this all happened, we went to some daily prayer, and we had, like, our numbers of people logging on every day to pray was big. For us, 20 devices, which we kind of work at a 1.5 kind of ratio of, meaning that's maybe 30 people to pray. We're a church of 50 or so adults, so 50 to 60 adults, a core, and then a wider, I guess, a fringe. And so that was quite a high percentage of people. And over the course of the week, probably 75% of the adults in my church would have come to one of our kind of prayer times, and that really encouraged me. We changed it to the mornings. This morning it was 3 of us. So there was the excitement, I think the novelty of going online, the people desiring connection, and you can't get face to face. In some ways, at the initial point, people thought, how am I going to fill my time? And actually at that point, it became easy to pray. Right. It became easy to join together, to set aside your own time. I think at that moment it became easy. What we've now seen, like, I don't know how many weeks we're in. I think we've done 11 Sundays now, or something like that. So it must be kind of towards the 3 months in. What's happened is that adrenaline energy boost starts to wane as things start to become normal. So what I'm hoping for in this season is that we are, as Christians, we are reestablishing rhythms of prayer, disciplines of formation in our own homes and in our individual lives that are not they're not dependent on a church service. They're not dependent on a gathering. There's a decentralizing of church and formation. Now, the challenge of that is it puts responsibility onto the individual to do it themselves. The beauty in that is, as we as individuals take that responsibility, we're leaning in, we're abiding increasingly in God himself, not in our leaders, our small group leaders, our mentors, our disciplers. And so there's the potential for this season of formation, the season of the church, to really lean into a deep sense of intimacy and being formed by the Spirit of God, by the Word of God, by the life of Jesus, in a way that is profound and deep and transforming. There's also the risk,
of course,
that we don't, that we put on Netflix, that we scroll our phones, that all of those kind of things. So I see that, and the quote that I've been hanging on to, and I think you would have sat in on it, and men of the church probably, if you watched Wildfire's Night 2, chatting to John Tyson, Pete's chatting to John Tyson, and he talks about this must be stronger than that, and those of you that didn't see it, the image was of Bonhoeffer, and Bonhoeffer is he's trying to retrain like this cohort of new priests, and the comment was that you're asking too much of them. Like, your training for these new priests is too much. You're not going to get anyone that's up for it. And the story is that they got on a rowing boat. They rowed up to this site where they could see the kind of the Third Reich training camp, and watching as Hitler and and his team are like putting people through their paces, training them to be part of the Third Reich. And the quote was that this, as in the formation of ourselves as Christians and as leaders, must be stronger than that. We're not in the place where we've got an oppressive regime like the Nazis. Is far more subtle than that, which makes it harder, because the formation that we are, that is and has a potential and is happening with us, is a kind of secular, progressive, self-fulfilling formation, which is meaningless, which is addictive, and therefore our formation of spiritual formation to be like Christ is actually a counter formation to what our default neutral mode would be, being formed by the world around us. So that quote of like, this must be stronger than that, a call to discipline, to pursue, like, to really pursue hard the ways of God, and to allow that to be our key formation, rather than, as I say, Netflix and
Right.
popular culture.
Or whatever else it might be. Yeah, I think it's interesting. You mentioned John Mark Comer's Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and it does feel like that's a book for the time, doesn't it? A book for this moment. Particularly, I found the section on Sabbath and how the countercultural nature of building that Sabbath into our rhythm. What does that look like for us as individuals, but also really what does that look like for them as a family? What does that look like for us as families? And there is this idea, I think, in this new moment that we're responsible for our own formation, and that's absolutely true, but also we're responsible for our family's formation, and for those around us, we're responsible for each other's formation. This is this is the priesthood of all believers, maybe being worked out, right? This is where it isn't about, oh, well, these guys are the church leaders and they'll sort everything out and they're the ones who need to be really disciplined or really close to God or whatever. The rest of us, we're all kind of like, this is about the formation of the priesthood of all believers, and actually we're responsible for each other's formation. And I love that. I love what you're sharing there. Thank you so much for that, Toby. Can we finish on one final question? Is there a verse, is there a scripture that is just resonating for you at the moment that you would leave us with?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna give you two answers. The first one is I've just been sitting in Deuteronomy, and I'm actually just writing some teaching at the moment for the church around giving. And in some ways, like, now is the time you feel like, oh, we shouldn't be talking about giving because everyone's hard up. Whereas it's in Deuteronomy, there's this revisiting of the commandments and of the law just before the Israelites are to step into the promised land. And they've come out of the wilderness, so they've come out of kind of crisis where they've had to rely on God for manna from heaven and a cloud by day, fire by night, that kind of reliance on God from a place of what we might be described as wilderness crisis, stepping into a place where the land flows with milk and honey, a provision and of promise. And there's this that kind of whole section, and I've been really sitting in from chapter 8 through to chapter 15, specifically around a few things. But like, just go back to that, like just start to reading some of that, because I feel like we're almost in that position a little bit now. And there's some warnings about, like, because when you get into the promised land, you're going to forget that you used to have to rely on manna. And you're going to start to think that the reason things are good is because you're really good, and forget that it's because God's good and He's giving it to you. So that as a bit of a chunky passage, there's some just stuff in there that's really speaking to me. And then last week I was with some team from Scripture Union. So amongst different things, I'm also I'm a mission enabler for Scripture Union across the Southwest. And I was with some of the team there, and someone brought John to us, and there was just this little verse in it. It's a very, very small letter anyway, you can read it in about 3 minutes. But as we start thinking about like rebuilding and creating, and my problem and our problem as a church is not that we're void of ideas, it's that we could have too many ideas and start running ahead and start like doing things because we think they're a good idea rather than because we're in tune and in step with the Spirit. And this just really spoke to me. So this is verse 9. So 2 John verse 9. There's not even any chapters, it's such a small letter. It says, everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both Father and the Son. And so that's one that's, maybe it's a personal one kind of for me or for our church, but to go, the abiding in Christ, being in tune and in step with the Spirit, is so important at this time, to hold His hand, for Him to hold our hand as we start to take these steps forward. We start to rebuild, recreate, as opposed to running on ahead. Because so that those are my contributions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, and thanks so much for your time. Really valuable listening to you. Thanks.
You're very welcome.